Today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Titan hydraulic brake lines and fittings for tandem axles, part number T4830000. So if your trailer's brake lines need replaced because they're either rusted and worn out or possibly got damaged underneath, our Titan brake line kit is going to be a great option because it's going to have everything we need to replace the brake lines on a tandem axle trailer. This comes with a total of 5 flexible rubber hoses, one from coming the back of your master cylinder going to the hard line, and then one for each wheel position. It's going to be a 1/8 rubber hose, and it's going to be flexible enough so that if we have any kind of movement, as well as the suspension moving up and down, we're going to be able to accommodate that. With every trailer being a little bit different, our kit is going to have all the length of line that you're going to need and all the T's you need to get in place to get to each position on our trailer. With that in mind that each trailer is going to be slightly different, we'll show you how we put it on ours. To begin our installation, we made sure that our master cylinder on our actuator is empty, and we removed all the existing brake lines that were on our trailer. So we're going to start out with a flexible rubber hose, and it's going to have a fitting that's going to match the back of our actuator here, and the other end is going to have this clip installed that the hard line is going to thread into. So we're going to take our hose and we're going to thread it into the back of the actuator. Get it nice and snug, and then we can come back with a wrench and tighten it up. So with our flexible hose at the master cylinder in place, we're going to start putting our flexible hoses on the back of our brake assemblies. Now the fitting is going to go back into the back of the wheel cylinder. It should be on the back of our brake assembly right up here. So we're going to start off by taking the fitting and putting it inside, and then we're just going to loosely hand tighten it so that we can still move the hose. Now our kit is going to come with some brackets, and that's actually going to secure our flex hose and what it's going to go into. So we're going to need to secure it to the bottom of our frame here. So I'm going to take a marker, and I'm going to mark a spot right where this little notch is going to go, and that's going to prevent any kind of movement. I'm going to drill a 1/4-inch pilot hole where that notch is going to go into. So we're going to modify the angle we're going to put it so that when our brake line comes over our axle, hopefully it won't be right above the U-bolts. So we're going to angle it just a little bit, and then we're going to mark our mounting hole. So now I'm going to take a self-tapping screw and I'm going to go ahead and start the hole before I get my bracket in place. So then I grabbed a small washer to go around my self-tapping screw to provide a little more surface area so when it bites in, I don't have to worry about it slipping through. So we're going to take our flexible hose, we're going to push it through the opening. We're going to make sure that it goes all the way through and it's nice and snug up against it. And then we're going to take our little keeper brackets and slide it around the collar on the flexible hose. Now there's going to be a little tab at the bottom. You want to make sure that's facing away from the hose. It is going to be a snug fit. You're just going to press it into place, and that's going to keep that hose from moving around and falling out of the bracket. So now with our hose in place, we're going to position the fitting at the top of the brake assembly so that the hose has enough slack to move, but it's not going to come in contact with anything or rub anything. So you may have to play with it a little bit until you find a good spot. And then once you find a spot where it's not going to touch or rub anything, then we're going to tighten that fitting down and it'll keep the hose from spinning. So now that we have this one in place, we're going to repeat that for all the other positions on our trailer. With all the flexible lines in place and all the brackets ready, we can get ready to put our T's in place. Now, the reason why we're going to have these T's is because we're going to have to go from the main line coming from the master cylinder. It's going to come into the T. One side is going to go to the front axle, and then the other side is going to go to the rear axle. Now, in order for us to get the fluid from each axle to each side, they are going to provide us with 2 more T's. So then once we have the fluid coming out of the main line, it'll be going into the T, and then it'll be going to the right and left side. So our main line is going to be coming on our left side of our trailer. So we're going to mount one of the T's relatively close to where it's going to be coming from. And we're just going to take a self-tapping screw and secure it right to the bottom of the frame here. We are going to have a very short line, and that's going to be connecting the two T's together that are going to be close to each other. So we're going to loosely thread them in place, get an idea of where we're going to mount our T. Then we can mount our other T right here in the frame. Now for our third T, I'm going to come to the one that's going to be for our supply line, and I'm going to go directly back to the rear axle. And we're going to be mounting this the same way we did with the other ones. Now our line is just a little bit too long. Now we have the option of either putting it in one end and marking it and cutting it and using a double flaring tool, or what we can do is we can put a slight S-curve in there just to take up some of the slack. I just want to mention, when you are bending it, you want to be extremely careful not to kink the line. Now if you have a tubing bender, you're going to want to go ahead and use that instead of just using your hands. I'm just going to put it in the appropriate slot and then apply pressure, and it'll cause the tube to bend rather than kink, because it's going to go around that radius right there. So once you have your curves in place, do the same thing. We're going to take our line, insert it into the T, and then right now we're just going to leave this hand tight, and we're going to thread that fitting on. And we can come back to the other T, insert our line in, making sure that it's going in nice and straight. And take our fitting and put it into place. Now you may need to bend it a little bit, just make sure everything's nice and straight, make sure everything lines up. Now the lines are going to be a little loose in there because they are just hand tight, but after we get all our lines ran, then we can come back and secure them however we need to. Next, we're going to go ahead and grab our 17-inch line, and this is going to be going to the left wheel cylinder where we had our flexible hose. So we can go ahead and loosely thread it in place, just get an idea of where it's going to go. And then if we come over and follow it to where our second T is, it's going to need to go into this fitting right here. So we are going to have to do a little bit more bending and get it into our T. Now once you have your line bent to go from this fitting over to the flexible hose, we can put it into place. Just going to loosely put the fittings in just like we have been. So in our rear T fitting, we're going to do the same thing with that 17-inch line, except we're going to go from the left hand side and we're going to go to wherever we have our soft line mounted. Now the T where our front axle is tied into, where we have the left side put on, we're going to come to the outside fitting, and that's going to run along the frame here. It's going to attach to our rubber hose on the outside. Now we have plenty of line, but we are going to have to cut it because this is going to be a 66-inch line, and that's entirely too much. You can wind it up if you want and have a little pigtail curly Q at the end. We're going to be cutting the line and using a double flaring tool. So we can mark our line, and then we're going to have to take it off so that we can cut it and put a flare in it. Now you're going to want to use a tubing cutter to cut the line. Now also, before you flare it, you want to make sure that your fitting is on the inside of the flare, because otherwise you're going to have to cut it off and restart. Now once the cutter makes contact, you're going to rotate it around the tube a few times. Then you're going to slowly tighten the knob to apply more pressure, and then continue to do that until the tube is cut. So we're going to be using our flaring tool. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the line is a 3/16 line, and you want to put a double flare into it. So if you flared it correctly, this is what it's going to look like when you're done. Now, if yours didn't come out like this, or if it has any cracks in it, you're going to need to cut it off and start again. So with our line flared, we're going to go ahead and put it in place, and we're going to do the same thing for the rear axle. We're going to measure out our line, cut it to length, and put our flare in. So we should have one more port open on our T, and that's going to be coming in from our main line. So we're going to have to run this from the T all the way up to the front, right by the master cylinder where we had that flexible hose. Now fortunately for us, we have holes drilled from where the lines were running previously, but we don't want to have our lines rubbing against the bare metal. So we're going to put in these snap bushing grommets. Now if you'd like to use some of these or pick some of these up on our website, you can use part number SWC8057, and you just need to have an 11/16 hole drilled so you can push the grommet right in place. So we're going to run our line and dry fit it just like we did for the rear lines. Cut it to length and flare it with our flaring tool. Once you have all your lines ran, you're going to come back with a 3/8 wrench and you're going to tighten down all the fittings. Now it is very important that you don't round off the nut that's on the fitting. So if you can, use a line wrench. And we're going to repeat that for all of the fittings on our trailer. Your kit's going to come with these little plastic keepers, and that's to hold the brake line in place. You just take a self-tapping screw and it'll hold it in place. However, we're going to be replacing them with these loom clamps. They got a little bit of rubber on the inside, and I just think they're going to have a little bit better protection and hold them in place a little bit better. Now for an added layer of protection, we're going to be filling our holes with some silicone, and that's just going to prevent any kind of movement in our brake lines, and if they do move, they'll have to rub through the silicone and then the plastic also before it'll actually start doing any damage. Now if you need some silicone, you can pick some up on our website using part number LT37467. So with everything tight and everything in place, we can go ahead and fill up our master cylinder and start bleeding our brakes. And that'll finish up your look at the Titan hydraulic brake lines and fittings for tandem axles, part number T4830000.